You're listening to On Mission with Dr. Matt Davis, a podcast designed to explore the personal mission of everyday leaders. Hear from men and women who are making a difference in their corner of the world and discover what keeps them on mission. Welcome to On Mission. I am Matt Davis, and today my guest is Aria Saunders, our assistant professor in applied science here at Maranatha Baptist University. She teaches primarily chemistry courses at the moment and grew up in Colorado. So today's wintry weather is no new thing for her. A suburb of Denver, the mile-high city. She grew up with her parents and 3 siblings. And one of their favorite activities to do as a family is the escape room, which I don't know if that brings you closer together or farther apart, but I've had both experiences with my family trying escape rooms over the years. Her first job was teaching beginning piano and flute lessons, and I'm sure, as we'll hear, her family is a very musical family, very talented as well. Her hobbies consist of singing and playing a variety of instruments, but she also enjoys reading, cooking, baking, and outdoor activities like hiking and riding bicycles and ATVs. She doesn't have a favorite sports team, but enjoys watching the Denver Nuggets and March Madness basketball games, and that's about the right time to hook into college basketball is around March Madness. Aria has a bachelor's and a master's of science in biomedical engineering from the University of Colorado. Her master's emphasis was in assistive technologies, which I don't even know what that is, and her research focused primarily on type 1 diabetes. Before coming to Maranatha to teach, she was the research coordinator at the Center for Inclusive Design and Engineering, a lab that specializes in developing and testing medical equipment for people with disabilities. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is going to be interesting to talk to you and hear about some of these really interesting experiences along the way, and certainly how you're using those now as a professor here at Maranatha. So growing up in Colorado, did you pretty much live in Colorado all your life, all the way through college?
Yep. All the way through college. I was a commuter during undergrad, so it was nice to stay home.
Missed out on the dorm life and all
a little bit, yeah, but I'm getting to experience the college community here, so that's been fun.
Well, there you go. You're getting it after the fact, which is probably way better, actually. So you're much better prepared. Yes. And obviously, those outdoor activities and all the fun of being in and around the Denver area, what a beautiful place to live.
It is gorgeous, and we're very close to the mountains and great hiking trails anywhere we go, and we have a family cabin in the mountains as well. That's our favorite place to spend the summers. And
wow, that sounds
great outdoor activities.
That sounds awesome. I bet you've seen a lot of interesting wildlife along the way.
Yep, we've seen moose. We've seen a bear on our property once. Thankfully, we were all inside, so that was okay.
Yeah, well, and it depends on what kind of bear, too. Like, did you have to, learn all the different types? Like, the black bears are okay, the brown bears is what you do, but that grizzly bear, leave them alone, that kind of thing. I remember when I was in college, we were traveling out west, and I think it was Loveland. Is that near? Yeah, that's in that sort of Colorado Springs-ish area. Yep. And we rented mountain bikes and went up. It's a lot easier to go down than up. I did learn that. It took us forever to get up. And we were starting on that downward leg of our circuit, and we came around a corner, and a herd of elk. I have never seen an entire herd of anything this size. It was running across the road right in front of it, well, the dirt road that we were using, one of the fire trails. And I mean, we just all stopped immediately and just watched in amazement at the wildlife going across. And then they were all gone, and we just looked at each other like, did that just happen? I mean, it's just incredible. That whole area is just a beautiful place to live. And now you live in beautiful Wisconsin, which is like flat as a pancake.
No mountains whatsoever.
We have a ski hill, but I think it's a former garbage dump that they literally just...
That doesn't count. No.
That doesn't count? All right. Well, I'll take your word for it. Did you ever go skiing? Do you like that?
We didn't go skiing much, which is kind of ironic coming from Colorado.
Yeah.
But it's kind of expensive, so.
That's the thing.
I went one
More
time,
of a tourist.
but I was so young I barely remember it.
Yeah. Now, why did I notice it says here that your master's emphasis was in assistive technology, focusing primarily on type 1 diabetes, and my father is dealing with that. And so we've learned a whole lot more about, blood sugar levels and the impact of different, diet and lifestyle and all of those kinds of things, which for type 1 doesn't always even help as much.
Right.
But what caused you to focus on that in your research?
Yeah, so I have type 1 diabetes myself. I was diagnosed junior year of high school.
Oh, wow.
And that's actually what prompted me into looking into biomedical engineering as a degree in the first place, because I started having to use medical equipment to keep me alive every day.
Wow.
And so I got so interested in the inner workings of devices like that and was like, there has to be a degree where people are focusing on this and making devices and trying to make people's lives better through medical technology. So that's where I found biomedical engineering. And it was really great because the school that I went to in Colorado is on the same campus as different hospitals. And so I was able to do lots of projects that were directly related to current issues with patients in the hospitals and current doctors' research projects. And my endocrinologist actually works in that hospital. And so he was my mentor in lots of different projects that I was working on. And so I was able to tailor a lot of my projects and my master's thesis to be related to type 1 diabetes. So I had that personal interest in it, but then also the educational interest in it as well.
How widespread is type 1 diabetes?
About 1 in every 10 people has it. So
really?
It's pretty
1 in every 10
common.
people?
Yep.
That's incredible. And my dad didn't really get a diagnosis until he was well into his 60s. And yours was caught your junior year of high school. And my understanding is if it's type 1, if it really is, if you get it right, that normally you've had that like your whole life, right?
Yeah, it's
Probably
kind of
just
an
not
ongoing process. Sometimes it happens quicker for other people and sometimes it's more drawn out. But yeah, it's an autoimmune disorder, so it's something that...
It is?
Yep.
Oh, I didn't even know that. I thought it was a blood chemistry issue or something to do with
yeah.
how
So type
you're...
1 specifically is autoimmune. So nothing necessarily really causes it, at least nothing that we've been able to find up until now. But
well, when my dad was first dealing with the symptoms of it, his doctor kept trying to control it with diet and exercise. And we kept thinking he was cheating because it wasn't making any difference.
Right.
And Dad would insist, like, I'm not cheating. And we're like, well, remember that bowl of ice cream last night? He's like, well, yeah, okay, that. But, it shouldn't have made that big of a difference. And it was almost like a relief to find out, wait a minute, I think this is actually not type 2, which would be more along those lines. But I think this is actually maybe type 1 diabetes. So what do you do to control it? Like, Dad has a patch on his arm, and it talks to his phone somehow, and so he can tell you, like, at any time exactly where he's at. Do you have something like that you work with?
Yeah, so I wear an insulin pump and a continuous glucose monitor. So both of them actually are controlled by my phone nowadays, which is super convenient because, everyone always has their phone on them.
Sure.
So it's great. But my insulin pump is connected to the continuous glucose monitor. We call them CGMs. And so it actually uses artificial intelligence to be kind of memorizing patterns of your blood sugars throughout different days. And then it can automatically adjust my insulin ratios depending on different trends that it notices. So it takes a lot of the pressure off of me to be constantly adjusting things. I still have to do a lot of it myself anytime I'm going to eat something, or if my blood sugars are out of range for whatever reason, there are still things I have to do to keep that in line. But it's great to be able to rely on the technology a little more.
What a time. Yeah, because I'm assuming that this isn't an all-of-a-sudden thing for the human race. So, but this is a time in the development of these medical options that we have so much more to rely on. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I need to get my dad one of those AI pumps because, when we found out how much math is involved in calculating insulin and blood sugar and all of that, I'm like, well, you don't have any hope of this. He's a Baptist preacher. I mean, there's not a lot of math involved in that. So I thought, oh no, we're in trouble. But that's awesome. So I've known people that have that little pump thing, and I guess it just strings right into your blood supply, and you have to kind of let it do the work along the way. That's so much easier, though, than having to give shots. Do that all the time.
Yeah, I went from I don't know, 5 or 6 injections a day
Oof.
to now my insulin pump, you change it out every 3 days. So it's much better quality of life for
For
sure.
sure. And I'm sure there are still things that you have to kind of limit or monitor, but that just gives so much more freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been able to be a part of the research that helps develop those things. There must be an incredible sense of satisfaction that comes from knowing that this is such a quality of life difference for not only that individual, but their entire family, really.
Yeah, it's been really neat. I think some of the best scientific discoveries are from people who have a personal vested interest in finding better solutions. I mean, maybe for some people it's not, as personal as it is for me. Maybe it's a family member or something that's dealing with whatever disease they're studying. But it's been really neat for me to be able to have that perspective of things that I experience every day. I want to find ways to make it better for me, but also other people that are dealing with the same thing.
Well, that's a great segue for me to ask you kind of the big question we always talk about here on the On Mission podcast is that we talk to people who have this sense of purpose that drives them, and then just trying to figure out what that is and how that connects to the decisions that you've made in your life and how you go about each day. So I'll hit you with that kind of big question here at the beginning. What is your mission in life?
I would say that it's based off of a verse that I've been focusing on a lot this year especially, but just something that's kind of been in the background of my life through most decisions that I've been making. But it's the verse that says, "Let your light so shine before men that others may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." And I think that that's just important, that with every action and interaction you have with others, they're recognizing the way that you respond and can see your actions as a result of your salvation and your hope in Christ. And so I think that's one way I've had a large impact, especially being at a secular university for 5 years. I had a lot of impact just in conversations with people by the way that they were noticing I was acting in stressful situations or responding to different circumstances.
Well, let me ask you about that, because that's a big part of your story, is that you've been involved in kind of the college side as you've been studying, and you have, let's see, there's 4 of you children, okay, and 3 of you came to Maranatha, and you were, for a long time in my thinking, like the one that got away, all right, and then an opportunity for you to come along arose, and I said, well, then obviously we got to get number 4 and complete the set. But you you went to school in Colorado and stayed at home, which is very similar to what my wife did. Her dad was a professor at Southern Illinois University, and so she was a faculty kid, if you want to put it that way, like Dr. Brock was at, or Dr. Marriott, I guess, this morning was asking the students today, but in a different context, to be sure. How did you find, you were a Christian young person raised in a Christian home, right? Even up to that point.
Yep.
How did you find some kind of Christian community to link into, even as a commuter student there on the state campus? What did you do to try and maintain that sort of sense of community that we all need?
Yeah. So a lot of that still just came from my home church and the community that I had built there. On the college campus, I met a few other Christians, which was always encouraging to me to not feel so alone. But it was a large campus and large classes, so it was hard to build the Christian community within my experience on the college campus. But the few friends that I did meet that were fellow Christians, we always enjoyed just creating study groups together and being able to talk about our faith. And not all of them came from the same background as me, but that was also interesting too, to see their perspective and the different churches that they've been a part of and different ministries that they've been a part of.
It's been a long time since I've been super involved on a college campus. I graduated from law school in 1999, so last century, all right? But last millennium, I guess, if you think about it. So, it bothers me when people say, "Oh, you graduated from college in the late 1900s," and I'm like, "Don't say it like that. That's ugly."
Worse.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, it's been a long time for me. Can you describe what you found as kind of the spiritual temperature on a secular college campus amongst the majority of students, or how hard it was, or what it was like to try and find other Christians that might share your faith?
Yeah, so it was definitely isolating at times because you were surrounded by very secular people that came from all sorts of different backgrounds. But anytime that I had an opportunity to share my faith, or if I was surrounded by, people who were doing things I wouldn't agree with, I didn't ever feel like I was being judged because of my decisions. They just kind of viewed it as a different lifestyle, or,
Right.
Oh, that's a personal choice. We can respect that, but we don't agree. So I never really felt like I was being persecuted per se. But it was difficult because, they would invite me out to different social outings that I wasn't comfortable being a part of. And so it was isolating in that regard because I felt like all of my social connections at college that I could have had, I didn't really get that experience because I went to class and talked to the people I was sitting next to, but then that was kind of where it stopped.
That's what my wife describes as well. Like, I just kind of went to class and kept my head down most of the time. It wasn't there for the social scene and all of what was going on. I was really surprised, and I don't know if it's still this way. I mean, honestly, the woke stuff that's come along has been like the last 5 years almost. So I honestly don't know if it's still this way. But I was surprised as a Christian school kid, right, as a Christian family raised in a Christian home, and even Christian college in my case. I was really surprised when I got to law school how, I'm going to use the word tolerant, people were almost curious.
Yeah.
Like, oh, wait. You actually believe the Bible? Like, they were going, ooh, I never met anybody like this before. And they had a lot of questions for me about that. It actually opened a lot of doors. Now, you've got to put your testimony out there, and that can be something that takes some courage, right?
Yep.
But once you've done that and kind of laid down the law, like, this is who I am and what I'm about, people really wanted to know more. So people were asking me, I remember one time somebody said, do you actually believe the Bible? I said, yeah. He said, you believe even like that Jonah and the whale stuff? And I'm like, well, the Bible says it was a great fish, but yeah, I mean, I believe that too.
Yep.
And they just thought that was the funniest thing. But that was year one. Year two, there were 3 students in my class who started law school married, and that were all of a sudden having marriage problems. And 2 of them, privately, very privately, almost like, don't tell anybody I'm asking you this, but we're like, what do I do? You seem to have something I don't have. What do I do? How do I handle this stress? What do I do about this? And I'm thinking, I'm not married and I'm not a pastor. I don't know what to tell these people, but it drove me back to the Word, certainly. But I thought it was very interesting, almost like Nicodemus, remember in the Bible, he's a religious leader. It's not popular for him to ask these questions, so he seeks the Lord out privately, and they go out like at night on the roof, like where nobody can see. And I'm sure you probably had experiences like that too. There was a genuine tolerance / curiosity, like I felt like Ripley's Believe It or Not or something. Like, look at this guy, he believes the Bible. I hope that it's still like that. I hope that it is. But maybe it's some socially unpopular parts of the Christian belief system that might not be as tolerant. What about lifestyles on campus? Because I think maybe sometimes we get this idea that every kid on a college campus, especially in Colorado, is just a pothead that doesn't care about their studies and, just drifting through life aimlessly and there for the party scene. I'm guessing you were in the STEM arena. Probably not as much of that going on.
Yeah, not as much. I did see some of that in like the first couple years in gen ed classes. But once I got into my upper level classes in grad school, for sure, everyone took everything very seriously, and especially in the science field, and all of our classes were with the medical application. So they kind of understood, a lot of just scientifically and medically why it's good to have a cleaner lifestyle. So that was nice.
Well, I had a medical checkup yesterday, and they asked me about alcohol use, drug use, tobacco use, and I'm like, nope, nope, nope. And you know what their response is? Oh, good.
Yeah.
You know, like here in Wisconsin, they never hear that. You know,
Yeah.
it's always like, well, you know, I don't get drunk that often, and you know, it's just there's an alcohol lifestyle here. In Colorado, it's all about, you know, legalized marijuana now. You go to Denver these days, and there's a weed shop on every single corner.
Definitely.
It's absolutely become an industry, you know,
Yep.
and that's led to a lot of other problems. I mean, the homelessness problems and just, I mean, a lot of businesses can't find reliable workers, and there's a whole other side effect to much of that.
Yeah.
So let me ask you some more about that STEM side of things, because you're talking about letting your light shine. So you're studying in a science field as a believer. How do you balance and reconcile your testimony there in terms of believing God's word by faith, and then these areas where obviously the scientific community is going to take a very different approach, very evolutionary approach? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, I had thought about that a lot as I was, you know, preparing to go to this university, and even just deciding whether that was the right decision or not. But thankfully, it wasn't as difficult at times as I thought it would be. We definitely had some moments in classes where I didn't agree, especially in, you know, your biology classes, and they're talking about evolution and different things like that. And to me, I just was more surprised at how people couldn't believe in a creator, because I remember one point in my general biology class, we were talking about the cell and how there's so much order even in like the tiniest part of the human body. And my teacher was like, and it's just crazy how this order just came to be. And I was sitting
crazy,
there in class,
all right.
and I was like, how can you not see that this didn't just happen? And so to me, it was just more mind-boggling. But it was easy to kind of pick that out. That wasn't really something that.
But I think we're led to believe that it's essential to believe in evolution in order to be a scientist, that you wouldn't be effective in your research, and you know that without a evolutionary grid, you'll reach all the wrong conclusions. I guess you didn't find that to be true.
I didn't in my personal experience. I know my path was a little different towards the end of my degree, because so in our program we got to choose a specialty even in undergrad, and so some people chose the more cellular and molecular side of things, and some people chose the medical device side of things, and I was on the medical device side. So once you kind of left the realm of, you know, looking at the cellular level and kind of how things came to be to turn into an organism, then you got into that problem a little less.
Right.
More on the medical device side, it was a lot of the engineering behind it and just the actual physical components. And then how, of course, that would affect the human body and in the application, but it came up a little less in that area.
I did a case in California once where we were dealing with a school district over evolution in the science curriculums, and they were trying to demand that the Christian schools teach evolution as true, as fact, and not even just as a side-by-side theory. They wanted it to be taught as fact, and if it wasn't, they were going to bar these students from ever transferring to a public school or ever attending a public university. It was kind of a wild situation.
Yeah.
So we had a few science experts, and one of the guys that we brought in was a PhD professor from Rutgers in New York. And he's the guy that invented the gene gun, they called it, and it was a form of gene therapy. He invented this, and his perspective was interesting, very interesting. In talking with him behind the scenes, he said there's not one thing in the scientific realm of current research and philosophy even that necessitates a belief in origins versus, you know, one versus the other, creation versus the other. And he says, in fact, all of our scientific laws are violated by the evolutionary grid, and we just have to say, well, it was suspended for a while. I said, well, that sounds like a miracle. You know, and he says, well, exactly. And yet the order of everything we observe and rely upon in order to even have a scientific method, he said, is all explained perfectly well by the scriptural story and truths of creation. So he did a marvelous job for us in that case. And he had a great not only knowledge of current science, but of the history of science. Yeah. And he went back and said, all of these people who developed these laws that you rely on and all of the people who developed the scientific method that you're claiming we violate were themselves Bible-believing Christians and creationary, scientists. Yeah. And that was kind of an interesting thing to think about. Yeah, I guess you're right about that. I know that the world of science can certainly have its moments where it might cause us to question faith. Have you found moments where, or do you find there to be a conflict between science and faith? I mean, it's almost a classic in literature, man of science versus a man of faith. Right. And here you are trying to reconcile both of those worlds. Is that just a constant turmoil in your soul, where you'd find that?
I would say in general, no, but there are definitely times that come up where it can be difficult. I think in terms of ethics, especially, we talked about that a lot in undergrad, which was always interesting to me. At a secular university, every single class, every semester, we had something called Ethics Day. And they would bring up these different concepts in terms of medical devices or different medical applications. And then we would talk about how you deal with the ethics of it. And it was so interesting to get the perspective from all of my different classmates. And a lot of them actually had really good thoughts and perspectives and answers that I agreed with frequently. And so those were interesting days to be talking about.
Can you think of an example, like what you mean by the ethics of, especially in relation to like medical devices and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so, I mean, one example could be just whether you would give a medical device or a immunotherapy or drug or something to a person depending on their background or, disease state, different things like that, and trying to determine like who deserves it more than another person. Ouch. A lot of that can get really touchy.
Are they? Why? Because they're scarce and there's only so many to go around, or why would we be picking and choosing?
Some of it comes into insurance issues too. Oof. If they don't cover it, how much do you fight it for certain people?
I know in some countries that have nationalized health care, they ration the health care. And that was one of the big arguments against doing something like that in the States. And I wouldn't prop up our current healthcare and insurance system as a great model of how God intended for that to happen. Yep. But it's certainly better than what they see in terms of waiting lists. And they will even tell someone, I'm sorry, you're too old for us to do that procedure because you don't have enough life left for it to be worthwhile in the amount of money that the people, the government would be spending on your surgery or your transplant or whatever that case might be. So those are difficult ethical questions, most of which are created by other really bad choices that have been made along the way to get us to that point. Yep. And most of those big ethical quandaries come from like, okay, what do we do now, that this person is in this quandary that either they created or somebody else. So I would guess in that case you have a huge advantage because you have a moral foundation of Scripture to actually draw from, as opposed to just pulling it out of thin air from somebody who, as an atheist, just believes we all showed up here from natural processes of evolution, right?
Yeah, well, from my perspective, you're thinking as the person as a whole and wanting to value every single person no matter what age or stage of life. But other people might be just looking at the financial implications or just resources that are available. So there are some differences just in how you're coming at the problem. But
one of the other sides of the coin is the fact that as a believer, we look at someone as an eternal soul. And I know that it has been frequently very puzzling to medical doctors to watch the homegoing, say, of a believer and how their family interacts with that versus someone who doesn't share that same system or belief. There's a sense of loss and sorrow anytime someone passes, but we don't sorrow as those without hope. Right. And so there is a different, I hate to use the word calculation, but it is. It's a different calculation for the believer because we do understand that the suffering of this present world is temporary. Mm-hmm. And we look forward to a home in heaven. So much of what you've been focused on in your research is making this world better, more productive, better quality of life for people. Also understanding that this life isn't really even what it's all about, is it? Yeah. So what made you think about, because you're engaged in some really awesome research and personally benefiting from all of that innovations that you, there's one before I move on. One question I want to ask. How long does it take for something that you and your brilliant scientific friends are coming up with as an idea to actually make it onto the market where it's actually making a difference for a big number of people?
It depends on the type of device. So in regulatory affairs, there's lots of different levels of what type of, I guess, severity of disease you're treating or how important your device is depending on how, I guess, I'm trying to think of the word, but how much it's affecting your everyday life. And so for some devices, it might just take a couple years. Some of them can be 10 to 15. It just depends on all of the regulations behind it, FDA testing. There's a lot of things that go into that. But different projects that we've worked on in undergrad and grad school, we never actually got anything to the market, but
because you're not in school long enough,
right? Right.
But we
did get some pretty viable prototypes, and so that's always exciting to see. At least most of the prototyping process get to be fulfilled, and then maybe someday someone will come behind us and try to bring it all the way to market.
See it all the way through.
But it does take a decent amount of time.
The University of Wisconsin is a major research university, and they frequently patent the discoveries that they make through their research. And they have a massive bazillion, and it is a big endowment that has come primarily from selling the patents that our tax dollars funded. Okay. I have a real ethical problem with that. All right. But I think that those kinds of discoveries shouldn't even be patented. I think they should be made open source and just put out for people to do. And, wouldn't it be amazing if you could 3D print, right, one of those devices and have it in people's hands so much quicker? Now, we want them to be safe and effective, and that's, definitely, I think, what takes most of the time, right? That's where all your testing comes in. But what an incredible seat to have on that particular train, just to see that process and taking shape. Gives a lot of sense of accomplishment, I'm sure, and pride to know that you were a part of something like that. So in light of the amazing opportunity to be involved with that, what made you think, I want to also, I've learned some things along the way. I want to be engaged and involved in the teaching side of things. How did God lead you that way? Because, again, your mission in life is I want to let my light shine, but that's a general umbrella. There's lots of ways that you could do that. So how did you come to believe that this was something God was calling you to do?
Yeah, so in my job experience before coming here, I enjoyed it, but a lot of it started to just get a little monotonous. The exciting parts were few and far between. And I just love science and math and just studying all the many ways that God has created us to be just amazing human beings. And I want other people to get excited about that as well. And so teaching is one of the ways that I can share my excitement of different scientific concepts with other people who are learning it and hopefully get them excited about it too.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can go off and be doctors or nurses or researchers in the medical field. So I think a lot of my desire to come and be a teacher now is to just be sharing my love of science so that I can help others grow in their love of science as well.
And how's it working out? Are you feeling more comfortable now as you get your feet under you? And I know it's, still kind of new in the transition with career and everything like that, but have you found those light bulb moments where you see it coming on for the student, like you remember it happening for you too?
Yeah, it's been so fun to watch, especially in labs. I'll have different students come up and just say, oh, this was so fun. I loved seeing this happen. And I always try to relate the lab experiments that we're doing to what we're talking about in class so they can understand why it's important. Why do you need to memorize these different polyatomic ions and things like that? And so I see a lot of light bulb moments in the lab because they're getting that hands-on experience. They're seeing actual reactions happening and they get excited about it.
I didn't take a whole lot of science in college. I took what you had to in high school, right? Lord had a different path for me. I remember dissecting the frog the first time in general biology class, and I had seen people do it, and first time I had that scalpel in my hand, I was so nervous about it, and I was so gentle, and I just basically tickled that frog's tummy with that scalpel. I mean, nothing happened at all. And so Dr. Barnes came around and he said, Matt, you gotta go a little harder with that thing. I think I went all the way through the frog with the next try. So everything inside was ruined by that time. But it's just amazing, the skill and all of the complexity of life that God has created. Yep. I heard a Christian apologist, creation apologist the other day say, we have single cell life, mainly those are viruses, right? Mm-hmm. And we have multi-cell complicated life. He said, you realize there are no 2-cell organisms? There are no 3-cell I mean, he talked about there is no transition between 1-cell life organisms and just absolutely complicated and incredibly complex life. And that really kind of goes against a lot of this theory that we just sort of evolved from, 1-cell organism that got, I don't know, did a mud puddle get struck by lightning, I guess? And where'd the mud puddle come from? That's what I've always been wondering about. But how do you find working with Christian college students in particular? So you've had now a chance to kind of contrast what it's like to be on that secular campus where it was not impossible to find Christian friends, but a bit of a different experience there versus what you kind of witness and see for the students like here at Maranatha.
It's refreshing for sure because I am able to connect different things that we're talking about in class to our divine creator. And just, I mean, obviously in my classes in undergrad, I would still be thinking that, but you don't really get the opportunity to share it as much. So it's nice to not have to feel like I have to hold that back. I'm able to just say, hey, look at this. This is directly correlated to this that we see in the scriptures. And so that's been really neat. And just seeing their desire. A lot of my students are interested in going on into the medical field, and their desire to be a light in that area as well. It's really neat to see their heart for other people.
Is the stigma of STEM being a male-dominated field, is that changing in your experience?
I think it's starting to. My program that I graduated from, our class was actually more female than male.
Really?
And that was the second year in a row from that program that we had that.
I know that's true in college overall. I wondered if it was flowing into the STEM fields as well.
Yep.
Do you find it to be more challenging? I mean, because I'm sure the lab environments and things, the more entrenched, the higher levels are still pretty much, the good old boys club in a lot of ways. Yep. Are there certain challenges that come along with that? I'm just thinking about what advice you would give to a young person that's trying to break into that field. Like you said, a lot of our students are interested.
Yeah. Sometimes it can be hard to get the respect at the same level. Not necessarily that we're completely looked down on, but I think there is some of that just, you
got to fight to prove yourself a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. You have to work a little harder at making yourself visible and making sure that you kind of not brag, but definitely talk about your accomplishments.
Isn't that
so
hard,
they can
though?
understand
that goes
where
against,
you're coming from.
That goes against our Christian humility and some of those things. But I bet that's hard for any young person trying to break into an entrenched, area, especially as an undergrad or even as a grad student, master's level grad student, when you're surrounded by all of these accomplished PhDs that are kind of like, okay, you're just the next graduate assistant that comes along, right? They've seen them all. And I hear a lot about those kinds of environments as well, being ultra competitive and a lot of where you have to like pump yourself up to make it anywhere. It can be a complicated thing for a Christian to navigate, I would guess.
Definitely. But I think taking different opportunities that the Lord provides you throughout your education. So I did internships, I did lots of different projects and was able to get published. Things like that are things that you can talk about without feeling like you're bragging or trying to make yourself look better for no reason. You can actually put some stock behind what you're saying and
here's what
just
I
talk
did.
about things that you did, and then that, increases their respect for you and their confidence in what you're able to do.
Well, I'm so thankful that God led you here and for the influence that you're having with the students, with your colleagues. You are so highly respected, and in a short period of time have just become such an important part of that faculty team here at Maranatha. And I know that our students can look at you, your life, your experience, and your testimony and think, man, if God would let me be like her someday, wouldn't that be an amazing and worthwhile life? You got a lot ahead of you, but God's taught you a lot along the way, obviously. And I thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule. Hopefully nothing died in the lab while you were in here, all right, talking to us. And I just appreciate it so very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to On Mission, a podcast produced by Maranatha Baptist University. No matter where you go to school, you're going to face the enormous social challenges of our world today. Where do you want to go through that developmental process? A place like Maranatha, designed to affirm your faith and help you think biblically? Or a secular college, dedicated to godless instruction in a God-free or truly anti-God environment that offers no hope, no joy, no faith, and certainly no peace? At Maranatha, you'll be surrounded by friends who have also chosen the path of truth and faculty who devote their lives to service. Maranatha is more than a Christian college. Find out more at mbu.edu. And for more information about our podcast guests and to listen to all the previous episodes, visit mbu.edu/podcast. Join us again next week as we examine what keeps leaders on mission.